This afternoon we have some very interesting speakers as well. Our first presenter, Dr. Vincent Felitti, was featured in a Maclean's magazine supplement, this issue of Maclean, earlier this month for his recent presentation at a conference in Alberta. And the response to his presentation there was described as, quote, more fitting for a rock concert than a conference. A chapter co-authored by Dr. Felitti has been included in your packages for your reading pleasure. Dr. Felitti founded the Department of Preventive Medicine for Kaiser Permanente in San Diego and served as Chief of Preventive Medicine until March 2001. He was co-lead of the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE study, of over 17,000 adults demonstrating a powerful and graded relationship between 10 categories of adverse experience in childhood and some of life's most common chronic diseases a half century later. The ACE study provides a new paradigm for understanding the prevalence of the more common causes of adult death in the U.S., the basis for some of the more difficult public health problems, including obesity and addictions, states of adult well-being, including depression and suicide attempts, job performance, and healthcare costs. This new paradigm for understanding will be helpful as we further explore our strategic priorities, and particularly chronic disease prevention and management and mental health and addiction, and as we advance them in the Northwest. And we're so delighted that Dr. Felitti has traveled from San Diego to be with us here in Thunder Bay this afternoon. Welcome, Dr. Felitti.
Thank you very much. It's not every day that I get to see fresh snow coming down. I'm delighted to be here. I've never been to this part of Canada before, this part of Ontario. The ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, is basically an exploration of how we become what we are and the consequences of that medically, socially, and economically. It's the largest study of its type that's ever been carried out. And it was carried out in the Kaiser Permanente Medical Care Program in San Diego. Kaiser Permanente is a large prepaid medical care system in the United States, largely on the West Coast. We have about 10 million members, so it's a big system. In San Diego, we have a little bit more than 500,000 members in a city of approximately 1.25 million. It involves 17,500 middle-aged, middle class, and I really stress that, Americans. Middle class is important. This is a biased sample. I have no hesitation stating that, because if things are this bad in a middle class population, they surely are not going to be better in a troubled population. The study really began with this patient in a very real way. In the Department of Preventive Medicine, amongst other things, we were running a very large obesity program using the interesting technique of supplemented absolute fasting, wherein people, if they have the weight to lose, will stop eating all food completely for prolonged periods of time, at least up to a year, we know can be done very safely. They have to take a supplement so as not to die from doing that, as did the Irish hunger strikers after about 6 or 7 weeks. But the point is that with absolute supplemented fasting, or supplemented absolute fasting, it's possible to take a person's weight down quite reliably and safely about 300 pounds a year. And we were doing that in the early 80s, we still do, but not at one shot. And we discovered that this turned out to be a rather terrifying experience for people. So in 1985, this young woman, 29 years old, came in to see us. She said she had this problem, and we said, yeah, we can help with that. And our first mistake was accepting what her definition of the problem was. We saw morbid obesity as being the problem. It was not. It was simply the marker for the problem. And so we took her down from 408 to 132 pounds in 51 weeks. And thought, my God, we must really know what we're doing. Look at the results. The whole thing blew up in our face. As you can see here, her weight curve, 408 to 132. She stayed there for a number of weeks, about 2 months actually, and then in 1 2-week period regained 37 pounds, which I would have previously considered to be physiologically impossible. And I asked her what she thought was going on, and she said, "I think I'm sleep eating." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, when I was a kid, I used to be a sleepwalker. I haven't done that for years, but I live alone. When I go to bed at night, everything's clean and put away in the kitchen. I wake up in the morning, pots and cans are open, boxes and dishes are dirty. Somebody's obviously been cooking and eating there. I'm the only one. I'm putting on the weight. I guess that's what's happening." And I said, "Yeah, okay, it's got a certain logic to it. I've never heard of it, but why do you think it's happening now?" Which turned out to be a very important question. Why not 6 months ago? Why not 2 years from now? Why now? And she said, "I don't know." "Yeah, okay, but what do you think?" "I don't know." "Yeah, you said that, but what do you think?" "I don't know." "Yeah, you said that." And on the 4th pass, she stumbled and said, "Well, there was this man at work. He was a much older man, you understand. He was married, and he said to me, 'Hey, Patty, you're looking pretty good. You lost all that weight. How about you and me making it every week?'" That was the day the sleep eating began. And I remember thinking to myself, well, it's certainly a very clumsy proposition, but I mean, this is 1986. It is Southern California. It seemed like an extreme response. Then came a lengthy incest history with her grandfather. And suddenly, even the nature of her work made sense, because she was a nurse's aide on the night shift in a convalescent hospital. She was paid to stay awake and on her feet all night long while the old people were in bed. She disappeared for 12 years, then reappeared, had bariatric surgery, and after a 96-pound loss, which to me was not visible, she became intractably suicidal and was hospitalized 5 times over the course of a year, received 3 courses of electroshock to try to control her suicidality, etc. She illustrates the complexities of major problems, be they morbid obesity, be they alcoholism, be they addictions, etc. We'll come back to that. Within a few weeks, within 2 weeks, within 10 days actually, I ran into the same sort of case. Another morbidly obese incest history patient. And I remember thinking to myself, because the last such case I had seen was 23 years earlier that I recognized, I'm not likely starting the 3rd 23-year cycle within 10 days. It was in the course of using childhood sexual abuse as an opening wedge that we gradually began to see that this was a very common issue with major complications years after the fact. It was that led to the ACE study, to try to determine whether the demonstrably prevalent issues of childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, growing up in massively dysfunctional households, whether that was equally represented in the general population. And so in an ongoing collaborative study with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, we decided to take 26,000 people who were coming through our department, consecutive people, coming through for comprehensive medical evaluation, and ask them whether they would help us by answering a highly intrusive questionnaire about childhood experiences, but which information would never become part of their medical record. 71% agreed. So there's this big retrospective component of the ACE study. People coming through here, average age 57, 80% white, 10% black, 10% 10% Asian, matching current health status against what happened back here about a half century earlier, given their average age of 57.